The snow fell in thick, determined flakes outside the bay window of Maplewood Cafe, transforming the small Colorado town into something from a greeting card. Inside, the warmth of cinnamon and fresh-baked cookies mixed with the soft hum of Christmas carols playing overhead. 29-year-old Claire Montgomery checked her phone for the 8th time in 15 minutes, her fingers trembling slightly as she set it face down on the red-checkered tablecloth. 7:45. He was already 15 minutes late. She smoothed the fabric of her navy dress, the nicest thing she owned that didn't have paint stains or crayon marks embedded in the fibers. Her best friend Rachel had practically forced her into this blind date, insisting that Claire needed to live a little and stop hiding behind her 5-year-old son, Tyler, and her struggling bakery business. The cafe had seemed like a safe choice, neutral territory on Christmas Eve, when most of the town would be home with family. Claire's stomach twisted with a familiar anxiety. Maybe this was a sign. Maybe she should just leave before he showed up. If he showed up at all. Her ex-husband, Derek, had left her 3 years ago, trading their small-town life for a sales job in Denver and a girlfriend half his age. The divorce had been messy, leaving Claire with a mountain of debt, a son who asked too many questions about why Daddy didn't visit anymore, and a heart that had calcified around the edges. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and Claire looked up reflexively. A couple entered, shaking snow from their coats, laughing about something private between them. Not him. She didn't even know what him looked like. Rachel had been maddeningly vague about the details, saying only that his name was Jonathan, he was successful, and that he'd recently moved to the area. The setup felt increasingly like a terrible idea. Claire was reaching for her coat when the door chimed again. This time, her breath caught. The man who entered was tall, perhaps 6'2", with dark hair silvered at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore an expensive-looking charcoal coat over dark slacks, and snowflakes clung to his shoulders like small diamonds. But it wasn't his obvious attractiveness that made Claire freeze in place. It was the little girl attached to his hand. She couldn't have been more than 7, with the same dark hair as her father pulled into 2 slightly messy braids. She wore a bright red coat with white fur trim and carried a stuffed reindeer that had seen better days. Her eyes, wide and uncertain, scanned the cafe until they landed on Claire. Jonathan's gaze followed his daughter's, and something flickered across his face. Relief, perhaps, or resignation. He guided the little girl toward Claire's table, his free hand rubbing the back of his neck in what appeared to be genuine embarrassment. "Claire?" His voice was deeper than she'd expected, roughened by something that sounded like exhaustion. "I'm Jonathan Pierce. I am so incredibly sorry I'm late. And I'm sorry about—" He gestured helplessly toward his daughter, who was now studying Claire with the frank, assessing stare that only children can pull off without seeming rude. Claire blinked, her prepared irritation dissolving into confusion. It's okay. I mean, you're here now." She looked at the little girl, then back at Jonathan. "Hi. This is my daughter, Harper," Jonathan said, his jaw tightening slightly. "Her babysitter had a family emergency. I tried to call to reschedule, but my phone died in the car, and I didn't have your number memorized, and he exhaled sharply. "I probably should have just stayed home. This is completely unfair to you." Harper tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, you said we could still have hot chocolate." The vulnerability in Jonathan's expression as he looked down at his daughter did something strange to Claire's chest. This wasn't what she'd expected at all. Rachel had mentioned Jonathan was successful, but she'd somehow imagined a cocky businessman, perhaps recently divorced and testing the waters of single life. Not this man who looked like he was barely holding things together. Not this child who was clutching her stuffed reindeer like a lifeline. "Sit down," Claire heard herself say. "Both of you. It's Christmas Eve. No one should be alone on Christmas Eve." Something shifted in Jonathan's face, a crack in whatever armor he'd been wearing. "Are you sure? Because I completely understand if I'm sure." Claire smiled at Harper. "Do you like cookies? Because this place makes the best sugar cookies in Colorado. They have sprinkles and everything." Harper's eyes lit up, and she looked to her father for permission. Jonathan hesitated for just a moment before pulling out the chair across from Claire. "Thank you," he said quietly. and the weight behind those two words suggested he was thanking her for more than just patience with his tardiness. As they settled in, Claire noticed things, the way Jonathan's hands shook slightly as he helped Harper out of her coat. The shadows under his eyes that spoke of too many sleepless nights. The expensive watch on his wrist that contrasted sharply with the worn stuffed animal Harper placed carefully on the table beside her. "I'm Tyler's mom," Claire found herself saying, surprising herself. "He's 5. He's with his grandmother tonight, probably eating way too much fudge and watching Christmas movies." Harper perked up. "I'm 7. Does Tyler like reindeer? This is Jasper." She held up the stuffed animal. "He's been everywhere with me since I was little." "I bet Tyler would love Jasper," Claire said, and she meant it. There was something immediately endearing about this serious little girl with her beloved toy. "What's your favorite Christmas movie?" As Harper launched into an enthusiastic description of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, Claire caught Jonathan watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Gratitude, certainly, but something else beneath it, something that looked almost like disbelief. As if kindness was a foreign concept he'd forgotten existed, the waitress appeared, and Jonathan ordered hot chocolate for Harper and coffee for himself. Claire asked for tea, suddenly nervous in a way that had nothing to do with blind date jitters and everything to do with the realization that something significant was happening at this small table in this small cafe. "Rachel didn't mention you had a daughter," Claire said after the waitress left, keeping her voice neutral. Jonathan's expression tightened. "Rachel doesn't know. We've only met a few times through the business acquisition. She knew I was new to the area and single, and she was very persistent about setting this up." He paused. "I should have been more forthcoming. I'm not very good at this." "At what? Dating?" "At anything that doesn't involve spreadsheets and quarterly reports," he admitted, a ghost of a smile crossing his face. "Harper and I moved here 3 months ago. It's been an adjustment." "From where?" "New York." He glanced at his daughter, who was now humming along to the Christmas music and swinging her legs under the table. "My wife, Harper's mother, passed away 14 months ago. Breast cancer. She fought for 2 years. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with grief that was still clearly raw. Claire's hand moved instinctively across the table, stopping just short of touching his. "I'm so sorry." Jonathan nodded, his throat working. "The company I ran there, the life we had, it all felt impossible after Amanda died. Everything reminded me of her. Harper was struggling in school, I was barely functioning, and I realized we needed a fresh start. So when the opportunity came to buy the manufacturing plant here and relocate, I took it. Probably impulsively. Definitely desperately." "That's not desperate," Claire said softly. "That's being a good father." Something in Jonathan's eyes cracked open at that. A vulnerability so profound it made Claire's own eyes sting. Before she could say anything else, Harper reached across the table and patted Claire's hand with her small one. "Are you sad?" the little girl asked with the directness of childhood. "You look like you might cry." Claire laughed, the sound watery but genuine. Sometimes grown-ups cry because they're feeling lots of things at once. Not just sad things. "Like Daddy," Harper said matter-of-factly. "He cries sometimes at night. I hear him even though he tries to be quiet." Jonathan's face flushed, and he opened his mouth, but Claire spoke first. "That's because your daddy loves you and your mommy very much, and people who love that much sometimes need to cry. It's okay." The gratitude in Jonathan's expression was almost overwhelming. The waitress returned with their drinks and a plate of elaborately decorated sugar cookies that made Harper gasp with delight. As the little girl carefully selected one shaped like a snowman, Claire found herself thinking that this disastrous blind date was turning into something else entirely. Something that felt dangerously like hope. "So, what do you do?" Jonathan asked, clearly eager to shift the conversation away from his grief. "Rachel mentioned you own a business?" "A bakery," Claire said. "Well, technically I'm trying to own a bakery. It's been a struggle since my divorce. Turns out my ex-husband was better at spending money than making it, and I inherited most of the debt when he left. But I love it. Baking, I mean. Creating things that make people happy, like these cookies," Harper said through a mouthful of frosting. "These are really, really good." Claire grinned. "I'll take that as high praise." They talked as the snow continued to fall outside, as the cafe gradually emptied of other customers heading home to their families. Harper chattered about her new school, about missing New York sometimes but liking the mountains, about how her daddy worked too much but was trying to do better. Jonathan listened to his daughter with a tenderness that made Claire's heart ache. And when Harper wasn't looking, he watched Claire with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable, but somehow wasn't. It was Harper who noticed the time first. "Daddy, it's almost 9 o'clock. You said we had to be home by 9 to put out cookies for Santa." Jonathan checked his watch and swore softly under his breath. "You're right, sweetheart. I'm sorry, Claire. I completely lost track of time." "Don't apologize," Claire said, surprised by how much she meant it. "This has been really nice." As they gathered their things, Harper hugged her reindeer close and looked up at Claire with serious eyes. "Will we see you again? I like you. You're nice. And you didn't mind that I came with Daddy." Claire's throat tightened. She looked at Jonathan, who was watching his daughter with an expression that suggested he was holding his breath. "I'd like that very much." Jonathan pulled out his phone, newly charged from the cafe's outlet, and they exchanged numbers. His fingers brushed hers as he handed the phone back, and the contact sent a small shock through her system. "Merry Christmas, Claire," he said quietly. "Merry Christmas, Jonathan. Harper." She watched them leave, the tall man and the small girl, Harper's hand tucked securely in her father's as they stepped out into the snowy night. The bell chimed behind them, and Claire sat back down at the table. Her tea long cold, her heart beating strangely fast. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Thank you for giving us a chance tonight. You have no idea what it meant." Jonathan Claire smiled and typed back, "Merry Christmas. See you soon?" The response came almost immediately. "I'm counting on it." Outside, the snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, church bells began to ring, calling the faithful to midnight services. Claire gathered her coat and stepped out into the winter night, breathing in the crisp air and feeling, for the first time in years, like something had shifted in her carefully controlled world. What she didn't know was that Jonathan Pierce wasn't just successful. He was one of the wealthiest men in the country, a billionaire who'd built his fortune in sustainable manufacturing. And what he didn't know was that the struggling baker who'd shown his broken family kindness on Christmas Eve was about to change everything he thought he knew about second chances. But those revelations would come later. For now, there was just the snow, the hope, and the possibility that sometimes the worst timing could lead to the best beginnings. The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a strange blur for Claire. She'd expected Jonathan to text, perhaps suggest coffee, maybe ease into whatever this unexpected connection was between them. Instead, he'd shown up at her bakery on December 26th with Harper in tow, both of them bundled against the cold, their cheeks pink from the winter air. "We were driving past," Jonathan had said, though Claire's bakery was tucked on a side street that no one just drove past. Harper insisted we stop to say hello. Harper had nodded enthusiastically, her eyes already fixed on the display case of pastries. "And Daddy said you make the best cookies, so we wanted to see if that was true about everything else, too." Claire had laughed, her heart doing that strange flutter it seemed to do whenever Jonathan was near. She'd given Harper a chocolate croissant on the house and sent them home with a box of assorted pastries. Jonathan had tried to pay, but she'd refused, and the look he'd given her, something between gratitude and wonder, had stayed with her long after they'd left. He'd return the next day, and the day after that. By December 30th, it had become a routine. Jonathan and Harper would arrive mid-morning, after what Jonathan described as his absolutely necessary but criminally boring conference calls with the New York office. Harper would do homework, or color, at one of the small cafe tables, while Jonathan nursed coffee that Claire suspected he didn't really need, given the way his eyes tracked her movements around the bakery with an attention that had nothing to do with caffeine. "Don't you have a company to run?" Claire had teased on the third visit, wiping flour from her hands onto her apron. "I do," Jonathan had replied, his lips quirking into a half-smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Turns out it runs remarkably well when I'm not micromanaging every decision." Who knew? What Claire didn't know was the extent of that company. She'd gathered that Jonathan had money. His clothes, his car, the ease with which he'd tried to overpay for a box of pastries all suggested wealth. but she'd imagined a comfortable upper-middle-class existence, perhaps a successful regional business. The truth was so far beyond her comprehension that when it finally came out, it would shake the fragile foundation they'd been building. But that revelation was still days away. On New Year's Eve, Jonathan called her. Not texted. Called, his voice warm and slightly nervous in a way that made him seem more human, less like the polished businessman who wore $1,000 suits to buy croissants. "Harper wants to know if you and Tyler would like to come over tomorrow," he said, "for New Year's Day. I'm attempting to make brunch, which will likely be a disaster, but Harper has her heart set on it. She's been talking about meeting Tyler nonstop." Claire's first instinct was to say no. It felt too fast, too intimate, letting their children meet officially. But then she thought about Tyler, who'd been asking increasingly pointed questions about why Mommy was smiling so much lately, and about Harper's eager face in the bakery, and she found herself saying yes. Jonathan's address led them to the outskirts of town, where the houses grew larger and more spread out. Claire had expected something nice, but when she turned onto the private drive and saw the house at the end, a sprawling modern masterpiece of glass and timber that seemed to grow out of the mountainside, her hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Whoa," Tyler breathed from the back seat. "Mom, is that a mansion?" "It's just a big house, sweetie," Claire said, though her pulse was racing. Just how successful was Jonathan? Harper burst out of the front door before Claire had even parked, her braids flying behind her as she ran toward them. Jonathan followed at a more measured pace, his hands shoved into the pockets of his jeans that probably cost more than Claire's monthly grocery budget, she realized with a sinking feeling. The introductions between Harper and Tyler were immediate and enthusiastic. Within minutes, they disappeared into what Harper called the playroom, leaving Claire and Jonathan standing in the massive entryway with its soaring ceilings and artwork that Claire was fairly certain was original and expensive. "Your home is beautiful," Claire said, trying to keep her voice neutral even as her stomach churned with a growing sense of unease. Jonathan looked around as if seeing it for the first time. "It's too big," he said quietly. "I bought it because the realtor said it was the best property in the area, and I was making decisions based on spreadsheets and market value instead of what actually made sense. Harper and I rattle around in here like two peas in a warehouse." He led her toward the kitchen, which was all marble countertops and professional-grade appliances that looked barely used. True to his word, Jonathan had attempted brunch. There were eggs in various states of overcooking, slightly burnt toast, and what might have once been pancakes but now resembled hockey pucks. Claire couldn't help it. She laughed. "You weren't kidding about the disaster." Jonathan's shoulders relaxed, and he grinned sheepishly. "In my defense, I can negotiate a multi-million-dollar acquisition without breaking a sweat, but apparently cooking breakfast is beyond my skill set." "Multi-million-dollar," Claire repeated, the words sticking in her throat. Something shifted in Jonathan's expression. "Claire, there's something I should probably tell you. Something I should have told you from the beginning. But he ran a hand through his hair. "I'm not very good at this, clearly." Before he could continue, Tyler's voice rang out from somewhere deeper in the house. "Mom! Mom! Come see. Harper has her own movie theater." Claire's eyes widened. "Her own what?" "It's just a media room," Jonathan said quickly. But the damage was done. Claire was already piecing things together. The house, the casual mention of millions, the way he'd relocated across the country on what he'd called an impulse. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. "Really?" Jonathan met her gaze steadily. "My full name is Jonathan Pierce. I'm the CEO of Pierce Industries. We manufacture sustainable building materials and green technology components. The company is worth approximately $4.3 billion, which makes me, technically, a billionaire, though I've never felt comfortable with that label." The kitchen seemed to tilt slightly. Claire gripped the edge of the marble counter. $4 billion. "I should have told you," Jonathan said, taking a step toward her. "I know I should have. But Claire, do you know how rare it is for someone to look at me and see just me? Not my net worth, not what I can do for them, just me? That night at the cafe, you saw a tired father who was late and unprepared. You saw Harper, and you were kind. You didn't care about anything else, because I didn't know there was anything else to care about. Claire's voice rose, and she forced herself to lower it, conscious of the children somewhere in the vast house. Jonathan, I'm a baker who's drowning in debt. I live in a 2-bedroom apartment above my shop. My car is 12 years old. Your watch probably costs more than everything I own. I don't care about any of that, but I do. The words burst out of her. Don't you see? This isn't some romantic comedy where the struggling single mom catches the billionaire's eye and everything works out perfectly. This is real life. Your life and my life are completely different universes. Jonathan's jaw tightened. My wife died of cancer because even with all my money, all my resources, I couldn't save her. I'd give every cent of it to have her back, to give Harper her mother back. So no, Claire, I don't think our lives are as different as you imagine. We've both lost people we love. We're both trying to build something better for our children. We're both lonely and scared and doing our best. The raw honesty in his words stopped Claire's spiraling thoughts. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw past the expensive clothes and the billion-dollar company to the man who'd shown up late to a blind date with his daughter, who burnt pancakes, who cried at night when he thought no one could hear. I'm sorry, she said softly. You're right. This is a lot to process. I know. Jonathan's expression softened, and I'm sorry I wasn't upfront from the beginning. I was being a coward. I've had too many experiences with people who saw dollar signs instead of a person. Rachel set up the blind date and didn't mention the company because I asked her not to. I wanted one evening where I could just be Jonathan, not Jonathan Pierce of Pierce Industries. From the other room came the sound of children's laughter, pure and uncomplicated. Claire thought about Tyler, who hadn't had a father figure in his life for 3 years, who'd lit up when he'd met Harper. She thought about Harper, who'd lost her mother, and was clearly starving for maternal warmth. And she thought about Jonathan, who looked at her like she was something precious. Okay, she said. Jonathan blinked. Okay? Okay, let's start over. Hi, I'm Claire Montgomery. I'm a baker, a single mom, and I'm probably going to be intimidated by your wealth for a while, but I'm willing to try this if you are. The smile that spread across Jonathan's face was like sunrise. He extended his hand formally. Jonathan Pierce, billionaire, terrible cook, and possibly the luckiest man alive right now. Claire shook his hand, and when he didn't let go, she didn't pull away. They stood like that for a moment, hands clasped, the ruins of his attempted brunch around them, the sound of their children's play echoing through the too big house. So, Jonathan said, since I've established my complete incompetence in the kitchen, any chance you'd be willing to help me salvage this meal? Claire surveyed the damage and laughed. I think we're going to have to start from scratch. Story of my life lately, Jonathan murmured, but he was smiling as he said it. They cooked together, and Claire tried not to think about the fact that his kitchen appliances cost more than her entire bakery equipment. Jonathan proved to be a quick learner when given proper instruction, and there was something intimate about moving around the kitchen together, their shoulders brushing, his hand steadying hers as she showed him how to properly flip an omelet. When they finally called the children for brunch, Tyler and Harper came running, already fast friends, already making plans for their next playdate. They ate at the huge dining table that Jonathan admitted he'd never actually used before, and the conversation flowed easily, naturally. But as Claire watched Jonathan help Harper cut her pancakes, as she felt Tyler lean against her side in the comfortable way he did when he was happy, she couldn't shake the nagging worry that this was all too good to be true, that the gap between their worlds would eventually become too wide to bridge. She didn't know that Jonathan was thinking the same thing, watching her laugh at something Tyler said, wondering how long it would be before she realized she could do better than a broken billionaire with more money than sense, and a heart that still bled for his dead wife. Neither of them knew that the real test of their relationship was still to come, that Claire's struggles with her bakery were about to reach a crisis point, and that Jonathan's desire to help would nearly destroy everything they'd begun to build. But for now, on this first day of the new year, there was just the 4 of them, sharing a meal in a house that was beginning to feel a little less empty, building something fragile and precious and terrifyingly real. The crisis came on a gray Tuesday in mid-January, arriving in the form of a certified letter that Claire almost didn't open. She'd been at the bakery since 4 in the morning, preparing for the day's orders, her hands moving through the familiar rhythms of kneading dough, while her mind wandered to Jonathan. They'd been seeing each other for 2 weeks now. Careful, chaotic dates that involved both children, long phone calls after Tyler went to bed, stolen moments that felt too perfect to last. The letter sat on her desk in the tiny back office, its official seal seeming to pulse with malevolence. When she finally tore it open, the words blurred together. Final notice. Outstanding debt. Foreclosure proceedings. 30 days. Claire's legs gave out, and she sank into her desk chair, the paper trembling in her hands. 30 days. She had 30 days to come up with $47,000 or lose everything. The bakery, the apartment above it, the dream she'd been clinging to since Derek left. Her phone buzzed. Jonathan. Good morning. Harper wants to know if Tyler can come over after school Friday. Something about a very important fort building project. Claire stared at the message, at the easy normalcy of it, and felt something crack inside her chest. How could she tell him? How could she explain that while he casually owned a multi-billion-dollar company, she couldn't even keep her small bakery afloat? The shame was acidic in her throat. She typed back. Sounds perfect. See you then. The lie tasted bitter. For 3 days, Claire carried the letter's weight alone, serving customers with a smile that felt painted on, avoiding Jonathan's calls, sending brief texts that she hoped seemed normal. She researched loans she wouldn't qualify for, grants that had already closed, options that didn't exist for someone with her credit score and her ex-husband's lingering debts. On Friday evening, when she dropped Tyler off at Jonathan's house, she planned to keep it brief. A quick goodbye, a promise to pick Tyler up in a few hours. Nothing that would reveal the desperation clawing at her insides. But Jonathan took one look at her face and said, Harper, why don't you show Tyler where we put the fort building supplies? Claire and I need to talk. Harper, perceptive as always, grabbed Tyler's hand and led him away without argument. Jonathan guided Claire to the living room, to one of the massive couches that faced the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. Talk to me, he said quietly. And please don't say you're fine, because we both know that's not true. The kindness in his voice was what broke her. Claire felt the tears come hot and fast. And suddenly she was telling him everything. About the letter, the debt, the 30-day deadline, about Derek's financial irresponsibility that she'd discovered too late, about the divorce attorney who'd assured her she wouldn't be liable for all of it, but had been wrong, about the bakery that was her dream and her livelihood, and the only thing standing between her and complete failure. Jonathan listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each detail. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. 47,000, he finally said. I know it's not much to you, Claire said, wiping at her eyes. I know you probably spend more than that on a car or a watch or whatever, but to me it might as well be 47 million. I've been trying to figure out a way, anyway, but I'm out of options. Claire. Jonathan's voice was careful, controlled in a way that made her look up. Let me help you. No. The word came out sharper than she intended. Jonathan. No, I won't take money from you. Why not? There was genuine confusion in his expression. I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. You need $47,000. This is such an easy problem to solve. Easy for you, Claire said, standing up, pacing away from the couch. Don't you see? If you pay off my debt, then what am I? What are we? Am I the struggling baker you rescued? Is this whole thing just some billionaire fantasy where you swoop in and save the day? Jonathan stood too, his jaw tight. That's not fair, isn't it? Claire turned to face him. Be honest, Jonathan. Part of you likes that I need help. Part of you wants to fix this because fixing things is what you do. You fix companies, you fix balance sheets, and now you can fix me. You're not broken, Jonathan said, his voice rising for the first time since she'd met him. And I'm not trying to fix you. I'm trying to help someone I care about who's in an impossible situation that I could easily remedy. But that's the problem, Claire's voice cracked. It would be easy for you. You'd write a check and barely notice the money was gone. But I would notice. Every single day for the rest of my life, I'd know that I couldn't make it on my own, that I needed you to rescue me. Everyone needs help sometimes, Claire. That's not weakness. It's being human. Says the man who relocated across the country rather than accept help dealing with his grief. Claire shot back, then immediately regretted it when she saw Jonathan's face go pale. The silence that followed was terrible. From somewhere in the house came the sound of children's laughter, a sharp contrast to the wreckage of the conversation happening in the living room. "You're right," Jonathan said finally, his voice hollow. "I did run. I'm still running in a lot of ways, and maybe you're right about the rest of it too. Maybe I am trying to fix you, because I couldn't fix Amanda. Couldn't save her no matter how much money I threw at the best doctors, and the experimental treatments and the—" He stopped, his breath coming hard. "Maybe I'm exactly the person you think I am." Claire felt her anger drain away, replaced by an exhaustion so profound she could barely stand. "I don't know what I think anymore. I just know that if you pay off my debt, it changes everything between us. It makes it unequal. More unequal than it already is." "It's already unequal," Jonathan said quietly. "I have more money than you. You're better with people than I am. You know how to make your son feel safe and loved in a way I'm still learning with Harper. You can create something beautiful with flour and sugar while I can barely toast bread without burning it. Relationships aren't about equality in every measure, Claire. They're about bringing what you have to offer and accepting what the other person brings." It was a good argument, a rational argument, but Claire couldn't shake the image of herself as a charity case, as someone who needed to be saved. "I need to think," she said. "I need time." "You don't have time," Jonathan pointed out, not unkindly. "You have 30 days, which in the world of financial deadlines might as well be tomorrow. Then I'll figure something else out. There is nothing else to figure out." Jonathan's frustration finally broke through. "Claire, I understand your pride. I respect it. But this isn't about pride anymore. This is about Tyler's home, your dream, everything you've worked for. Don't throw it all away because you're too stubborn to accept help from someone who cares about you, someone who's known me for less than a month," Claire countered. "Jonathan, we barely know each other. What happens if this doesn't work out? What happens if we realize we were caught up in some holiday magic that fades in the harsh light of reality? Then I'm the woman who took money from a man she dated for a few weeks. I can't live with that." Jonathan looked at her for a long moment, something painful working behind his eyes. "So, what are you saying? That we should end this now, before it gets more complicated?" Claire's heart lurched. "I don't know. Maybe. I don't know." "Well, I do know," Jonathan said, and there was steel in his voice now. "I know that what I feel for you isn't holiday magic or a fantasy. I know that Harper talks about you and Tyler constantly, that she's happier than I've seen her since Amanda died. I know that for the first time in 14 months, I wake up and feel something other than crushing grief. So no, Claire, I'm not willing to walk away from this just because you're scared." "I'm not scared," Claire said, but her voice betrayed her. "Yes, you are, and so am I. I'm terrified that I'm going to mess this up, that I'm going to do or say the wrong thing and lose you, but I'm willing to be terrified if it means having a chance at something real." The words hung between them, raw and honest. Claire wanted to run to him, to let him hold her and tell her everything would be okay. But she also wanted to run away, to protect herself from the inevitable moment when this all fell apart. Before she could decide, Harper appeared in the doorway, Tyler behind her. "Dad? Claire? Tyler and I have been talking, and we have an idea." Both adults turned, trying to compose their faces into something approaching normal. "What kind of idea, sweetheart?" Jonathan asked. Harper looked at Tyler, who nodded encouragingly. The little girl straightened her shoulders in a gesture so reminiscent of her father that Claire's chest ached. "Tyler told me his mom's bakery might have to close. And I know you're sad about it, Claire, because Tyler is sad, and he says you've been crying. So we thought maybe Dad could buy some extra cookies or cakes or something to help." The innocent offer, delivered with such earnest concern, broke something in both adults. Jonathan closed his eyes briefly, and Claire had to look away. "That's very sweet, Harper," Claire managed, But it's a little more complicated than that. Grown-up stuff? Harper asked. Yeah, grown-up stuff. Tyler tugged on Claire's sleeve. Mom, are we really going to have to move? The fear in his voice made Claire's decision for her. She looked at Jonathan, saw the same concern mirrored in his expression, and realized that her pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. No, baby, she said, pulling Tyler close. We're not going to have to move. Jonathan's eyes met hers over the children's heads, and she saw the question there. She gave the smallest nod and watched relief flood his face. I have one condition, Claire said quietly. Anything. It's a loan. We draw up papers, set up a payment schedule. I pay you back every cent. Jonathan started to argue, then seemed to think better of it. Fine. But the interest rate is 0%, and the term is whatever you need it to be. Deal. They shook hands formally, like business associates, though the gesture felt like so much more. Tyler and Harper, sensing that the crisis had passed even if they didn't fully understand it, ran back to their fort-building project. Claire and Jonathan stood in the living room, the weight of what had just happened settling around them. The power dynamic had shifted, had become even more complicated than before. But what Claire didn't know was that Jonathan had no intention of ever collecting on that loan, that he'd already decided to quietly buy the building her bakery occupied through a shell company and ensure she never had to worry about rent again. And Jonathan didn't know that Claire's fierce independence would lead her to not only repay every cent, but to build her bakery into something remarkable. What they both knew, standing there in the fading January light, was that they'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed, and the only way forward was together. Spring came to Colorado like a whispered promise, melting the snow and revealing the world beneath. By April, Claire's bakery had not only survived, but was thriving in ways she'd never imagined. The loan from Jonathan sat in a special account, untouched except for the small monthly payments she insisted on making despite his protests. What had changed everything wasn't his money. It was his belief in her. Jonathan had introduced her to his business contacts, not as a charity case, but as a talented baker whose artisanal approach deserved recognition. Orders from corporate events, weddings, and high-end restaurants had started flowing in. Claire had hired 2 part-time employees and was actually sleeping more than 4 hours a night for the first time in years. But the success came with complications neither of them had anticipated. It was a warm Saturday afternoon when Claire arrived at Jonathan's house for what had become their weekly family dinner. Tyler burst from her car the moment she parked, racing toward Harper, who was already running down the front steps. The children had become inseparable, their friendship as natural as breathing. Jonathan met Claire at the door, and the kiss he gave her still made her knees weak even after 4 months together. But today, there was tension in his shoulders, something guarded in his eyes. "We need to talk," he said quietly. Claire's stomach dropped. Those 4 words never preceded anything good. Okay. Inside, the children disappeared upstairs, and Jonathan led Claire to his home office. A room she'd rarely entered, filled with monitors and technology that seemed to represent the part of his life she still didn't fully understand. He handed her a tablet displaying a news article. The headline made her blood run cold. Billionaire Jonathan Pierce's new romance. CEO dating local baker after wife's death. The article wasn't cruel, but it was invasive, detailing everything from Amanda's battle with cancer to Claire's divorce and financial struggles. There were photos, grainy paparazzi shots of them at the park with the children, outside her bakery, even one from Christmas Eve at the cafe. How did they? Claire couldn't finish the sentence. I don't know, Jonathan said, frustration evident in every line of his body. I've tried to keep a low profile since moving here, but someone must have tipped off the media. The story went live this morning. My publicist has been fielding calls all day. Claire scrolled through the article, each word feeling like a small violation. They'd quoted people from town, her customers, Jonathan's employees, even Rachel, who'd set up the original blind date. There's more, Jonathan said, and the tone of his voice made Claire look up. Pierce Industries is going public next quarter. I've been planning it for over a year. It was one of the reasons for the move, consolidating operations, setting up the new facility here. The board thinks this article, and our relationship, could be problematic. Problematic how? Jonathan ran a hand through his hair. They're worried about optics. A billionaire CEO in a relationship with someone who is recently in financial distress, whom he's given money to. They think it looks bad. Like I'm taking advantage of a vulnerable situation, or you're taking advantage of me. The unfairness of it hit Claire like a physical blow. So what are they suggesting? They want us to keep a low profile until after the IPO. No public appearances together. No acknowledgement of the relationship. Basically, they want us to hide. For how long? 6 months, maybe longer. Claire set the tablet down carefully, her hands trembling. And what do you want? Jonathan crossed to her, taking her hands in his. I want to tell them to go to hell. I want to hold your hand in public and not care who's watching. I want to introduce you as my girlfriend, not have to pretend you're just a friend when we run into business associates. But I have a responsibility to the company, to the thousands of people who work for Pierce Industries. If the IPO fails because of bad publicity, it affects all of them. Their jobs, their families. Claire pulled her hands away, moving to the window that overlooked the mountains. The view was spectacular, but she barely saw it. So we hide. We lie to people. We pretend this isn't happening. Not lie. Just be discreet. Jonathan, Tyler, and Harper are best friends. How do we explain to them why they suddenly can't have playdates? Why we can't all have dinner together anymore? The silence that followed told her Jonathan hadn't thought that far ahead. This is what I was afraid of, Claire said quietly. This is why I didn't want to take your money. Because your world has rules and expectations that I don't fit into. That's not true, isn't it? She turned to face him. Be honest. If I were from your world, if I were another CEO or someone from an old money family, would your board even care? Jonathan's jaw worked, and his silence was answer enough. Claire felt something inside her shift, a decision crystallizing. I need to tell you something I should have told you weeks ago. She told him about the job offer she'd received last month from a prestigious culinary institute in Denver. They wanted her to develop their pastry program, to teach, to create. It was stable, well-paying, exactly the kind of opportunity she'd dreamed about before Derek left and shattered those dreams. Why didn't you tell me? Jonathan asked, and there was hurt in his voice. Because I'd already decided to turn it down. Because everything I want is here, my bakery, Tyler's school, you. She paused. But maybe I was wrong. Maybe the universe is trying to tell me something. Don't. Jonathan's voice was sharp. Don't use this as an excuse to run away. I'm not running away. I'm being practical. Your life is complicated in ways I didn't understand. And maybe we moved too fast. Maybe we got caught up in something that felt magical, but wasn't built to last. I don't believe that. Jonathan closed the distance between them. Claire, I love you. The words hung in the air between them, the first time either of them had said them aloud. Claire felt tears sting her eyes. I love you too, she whispered. But sometimes love isn't enough. It has to be. From upstairs came the sound of children's laughter. Harper and Tyler playing some elaborate game that involved much giggling and running. The sound of their joy felt like both a benediction and an accusation. Claire made a decision. I'm going to take Tyler home. We both need some time to think about what we really want here. Claire, please. I'm not ending this, she said firmly. But I'm not going to hide either. Whatever we decide, it has to work for all of us. You, me, Harper, Tyler. Not just in private, but in every part of our lives. She left Jonathan standing in his office and collected a protesting Tyler from upstairs. Harper's face crumpled when she realized their playdate was ending early. But we didn't finish our game, the little girl said, her voice small. I know, sweetheart, Claire said, kneeling down to Harper's level. But you'll see Tyler again soon, I promise. It was a promise she hoped she could keep. The next 3 days were torture. Jonathan called and texted, but Claire needed space to think. She contacted the Culinary Institute, asked if the position was still available. It was. They could wait 2 weeks for her answer. On Wednesday evening, Claire was closing the bakery when a black town car pulled up outside. She tensed, expecting reporters or photographers, but instead, an elegantly dressed woman in her 60s emerged. Claire Montgomery? The woman asked, entering the bakery with the confidence of someone used to getting her way. I'm Margaret Pierce. Jonathan's mother. Claire's surprise must have shown on her face because Margaret smiled slightly. May I sit? This won't take long. They sat at one of the small tables, and Margaret looked around the bakery with an appraising eye. This is lovely. Jonathan told me about your work, but I wanted to see for myself. Does Jonathan know you're here? No. And I'd appreciate if we kept this between us for now. Margaret folded her hands on the table. I'm going to be direct, Ms. Montgomery, because I suspect you appreciate honesty. My son has been through hell. Watching Amanda die nearly destroyed him. For the past year, I've watched him go through the motions of living without actually being alive. Claire stayed silent, unsure where this was going. Then he met you, Margaret continued. And suddenly, he's calling me 3 times a week instead of once a month. He's laughing. He's actually present when he's with Harper instead of drowning in work to avoid feeling anything. You did that, Mrs. Pierce. Margaret, please, and I'm not finished. The older woman's expression softened. I know about the board's concerns. I know they've asked Jonathan to hide your relationship. What you probably don't know is that I sit on that board, and I've spent the last 3 days making it very clear that if they force my son to choose between his personal happiness and this company, they're not going to like his choice. Claire blinked. I don't understand. Jonathan built Pierce Industries from nothing. Yes, it's grown beyond him. Yes, it has responsibilities to shareholders and employees, but it's still his company, his vision. And if the board thinks he's going to sacrifice his family, because that's what you and Tyler are becoming, whether you realize it or not, for an IPO, they're fools. So what are you saying? Margaret reached across the table and took Claire's hand. I'm saying that tomorrow, Pierce Industries is releasing a statement. It will acknowledge Jonathan's relationship with you, emphasize that all financial dealings have been properly documented and transparent, and make it clear that his personal life is not up for board approval. There will be a brief media storm, and then it will pass, because ultimately, no one cares as much as we fear they do. And the IPO? We'll proceed as planned. I've already spoken with our major investors. Most of them are more concerned with Jonathan's leadership and the company's sustainable technology patents than his love life. Margaret smiled. The few who had concerns were reminded that there are other investment firms who would be happy to take their place. Claire felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. Why are you doing this? Because my son loves you. Because my granddaughter adores your son and talks about you like you hung the moon. And because I've learned that life is too short and too precious to waste on other people's opinions. Margaret stood. Now, I believe you have a phone call to make. Jonathan's been miserable for 3 days, which means Harper has been asking me increasingly difficult questions about why Tyler can't come over. After Margaret left, Claire stood in her empty bakery, her phone in her hand. She thought about Denver, about the safe choice that would take her away from complications and media scrutiny. Then she thought about Jonathan's laugh, about Harper's braids, about the way Tyler lit up when they all spent time together. She called Jonathan. Claire. He answered on the first ring, his voice rough with emotion. I've been going crazy. Your mother came to see me, Claire interrupted gently. There was a pause. She what? Claire told him about Margaret's visit, about the statement being released. As she talked, she heard Jonathan's breathing change, heard something like wonder enter his voice. I can't believe she did that, he said. I've been fighting with the board all week, trying to find a compromise, and she just steamrolled them. She loves you, Claire said simply, and she wants you to be happy. Are you? Jonathan asked quietly. Happy, I mean, with me, despite everything. Claire looked around her bakery, the dream she'd nearly lost, the business that was thriving, the life she'd built, and she thought about how much better all of it was with Jonathan and Harper in it. Yes, she said, I'm happy. And I'm sorry I pulled away. I was scared. So was I. I still am. Good, Claire said, smiling even though he couldn't see it. Because if you weren't scared, I'd think you weren't paying attention. This is terrifying. But worth it? Definitely worth it. They talked for another hour, making plans, discussing how to handle the media attention, agreeing that honesty with the children was paramount. When they finally hung up, Claire felt lighter than she had in days, The statement from Pierce Industries was released the next morning. As Margaret had predicted, there was a brief flurry of media interest, a few invasive articles, some social media speculation, but within a week, the news cycle had moved on, and life returned to a new normal. A normal that included Sunday dinners with Margaret, who turned out to be as formidable an ally as she was a businesswoman. A normal that included Tyler and Harper's school scheduling coordinated playdates. A normal that included Jonathan learning to bake, badly, but with endearing determination, and Claire learning about sustainable manufacturing with genuine interest. 6 months later, on a crisp October evening, Jonathan took Claire back to Maplewood Cafe. Harper and Tyler were with Margaret, part of what Jonathan had called an elaborate conspiracy. They sat at the same table where they'd first met, where Jonathan had arrived late with a 7-year-old and a stuffed reindeer. The cafe had strung autumn lights for the season, and soft music played overhead. "I've been thinking about that night," Jonathan said, taking Claire's hand across the checkered tablecloth. "About how close I came to not showing up at all. My first instinct was to cancel, to stay home, to keep hiding from life. I'm glad you didn't," Claire said. "So am I." Jonathan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I know it hasn't been that long. I know there are people who will say we're moving too fast. But I've learned that life is unpredictable and precious. And when you find something real, you don't let it go." He opened the box, revealing a ring that caught the light. Elegant, but not ostentatious, perfect in its simplicity. "Claire Montgomery, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life learning to make edible pancakes and being the luckiest man alive?" Claire laughed through her tears. "Yes, yes, absolutely yes." As Jonathan slipped the ring on her finger, Claire thought about the journey that had brought them here. Through grief and debt, through media storms and board meetings, through fear and doubt to this moment of perfect certainty. Outside, the October leaves fell like confetti, and somewhere across town, 2 children and 1 delighted grandmother were probably celebrating their successful matchmaking. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility and challenge and joy. And it all started because a billionaire was late for a blind date on Christmas Eve, bringing his daughter and his broken heart, and finding a woman brave enough to see past both his wealth and his wounds to the man beneath. Sometimes, Claire thought, as Jonathan kissed her, the worst timing leads to the best beginnings, and sometimes, happy endings are just the start of something even better.